Hi everyone, it's Lisa from I Dream in Soap. Welcome to my channel and thanks for stopping by. I'm really excited about today's soap. I've been working on developing a new technique and today is the day I bring it to the world. Too dramatic? Maybe a little bit. Anyway, I do really believe this is a new technique. I've seen loads and loads of soapy YouTube and obviously hundreds of soapy pictures, and it's definitely not something that I've seen in soap before. However, I can't guarantee that I've seen everything, and before making this video I did ask a number of my soapy friends and they said they'd not seen it either. So hopefully this is something new and a little bit different. Now in the soap world we tend to give names for everything, so Whitney, a friend of mine, came up with the idea of calling this Tiffany Sides. Just to try and sort of link back to the effect that you get, you know, when you have those beautiful glass Tiffany lamps or like the stained glass windows, that's kind of the thing we're looking at. Come on, let's go and make some soap. I'm going to start my Honeywash soap by making an embed of a honey pot to go through the middle of the soap. The colours I'm going to use are all from Mica Mama, and they are Black Gold, Golden Shimmer and Sunshine Yellow. Now I want my honey pot to be darker at the top and bottom and then have a lighter coloured stripe along the middle. So therefore I've calculated the oils I need for my honey pot, and for the darker elements I've pre-mixed the colourant straight in with the oils so that it's consistent between both of those layers. So I'm just weighing out what I need for the first layer. And then I've also calculated and weighed out the exact amount of lye solution that I need. And then I'm going to add my sodium lactate to each part of the batch as well. And then just carry on as normal. I'm just going to mix my lye solution with my oils. Then I'll stick blend it to just beyond a light trace. Now I do want this layer to set up reasonably quickly, but I don't want my trace too thick because it's important that when I pour it into the mould I get a nice flat layer. And if you allow your trace to become too thick, you end up trying to smooth the top down with a spatula and that never really works. So a thinner trace will give you a nice flat top. The fragrance oil I'm using is Honeywash from Gracefruit in the UK. So I'm just going to weigh out the amount that I need for each layer, mix it in as normal, and then take my batter and pour it into my mould. Now this little mould that I've got to make my honey pot embed is something that I made myself, so unfortunately I can't give you a link and tell you where you could buy one. In between each layer I'm going to wrap it and cover it up, and that will keep it nice and warm and just help those layers set up nice and quickly. I'll then repeat exactly the same process for the middle yellow layer, and then I'll move on to the final brown layer. Now with this final layer I've actually got two colours. I've got the main darker brown that's going to be the honey pot, and then I've got the lighter, and I've actually mixed some of the lighter golden colour with some of the yellow to give me a honey colour. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do sort of like a little drop swirl into that top layer, so that will then give me the effect, I hope, of, you know, when you get that messy bit that pours over the side of the honey pot. I then used a pipette to add a second sort of layer of the honey colour, just so I can get sort of two levels to the droplet coming over the side, I guess, to make it sort of look a little bit more drippy, I guess. I then just levelled out the surface so I could have a nice smooth flat top to my honey pot, and then I'm going to C-pop it over the night. So into the oven at 170 degrees Fahrenheit, 75 degrees centigrade. As soon as it goes in the oven, turn the oven off and leave it there overnight. Now I'm just mixing up a very small quantity of black soap batter, and that's what I'm going to be using when I start my new technique. Now, the idea of this came from various things that I've seen, the things like stained glass windows, Tiffany lamps, and even those, perhaps you've seen it, those biscuits or cookies, you know, where you have some sort of flood icing on the top, all those types of pictures. So what I'm going to do is translate that into soap by having these pictures all the way down the side of your loaf by piping it onto the inside of the soap mould before pouring the rest of the batter. So as you can see, I've just been making up a small amount of black soap batter using some activated charcoal. I've also put some fragrance oil in using the same Honeywash fragrance that we're using in the rest of the soap. I'm going to take this soap batter and I'm going to blend it up to a medium trace. Now, consistency wise, it's a careful balance actually. I have tried this technique a few times, and if you allow your batter to get too thick, it doesn't flow nicely, and you've got to make sure that you get a really good contact with the sides of your soap mould, because anytime it lifts off the soap mould, it's then going to give sort of a rough finish to the picture that you want. And obviously if you have your soap batter too thin, then it's not going to hold its shape. So I've now filled my piping bag, and the tip that I'm using is just the tiny little round hole. It's the number 1. Now this may seem like a really small tip to be using, but I have tried several different tips and this one works the best because it gives you a nice little definition in your pictures and stops your borders being all chunky, and also it is still tall enough to retain that flooded batter that we're going to use. Now the mould I'm using is my acrylic mould from Custom Craft Tools. I love this mould and you've probably seen it in most of my videos. Now the brilliant thing for this technique is I can actually take this mould apart and therefore just get to the panels really easily. Now if you haven't got a mould that you can take apart, that's not the end of the world. You could just get yourself a bit of acrylic sheet and you can lay that down flat on a board and then just pipe onto that and then lift that sheet and pop it into the side of the mould. Now I've made a little template for my design. I've just drawn out all my bees and placed them all the way along the mould. Now obviously if you haven't got the type of mould that you can see through, then you're not going to be able to do this and you're just going to have to do it a little bit more freehand. Now if you haven't got the type of mould that you can see through, you can still do this technique, just do a more random design, something that doesn't have to fit squarely onto the side of a bar. So as you can see, I've just been piping all around the outline of the bees. I'm also piping in their little bee heads and the stripes on their little bee bodies. So there's our 2 sides of outline bees done. We now need to start doing the flooding element. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of batter for both the white and the yellow elements that I need, and then just split it out for each of the colours. Now do make sure that the batter you use for the flooding element is at a very light trace. If it's any thicker than that, it won't flood and fill all the gaps nicely, and then you're going to have little holes in all of your pictures. Now using a little pipette is ideal for this because you're not going to get it into a piping bag because it's going to be too runny. So just literally just dropping in between the black lines wherever that yellow colour should be, or whatever's going on in your design. And every now and again make sure you are tapping down the sides of those moulds to ensure that that batter is sinking straight through the design and against the edge of your mould. And then repeat the process again with what for me is my last colour, just to finish off the design. So when you're completely happy with your design, just leave it to sit for a little while and set up. You just need it to get to the point that you're happy that when you pick up the side of that mould, your beautiful design's not just going to run all down the sides. Now we can move to the inside of the soap. So the main colours I'm going to be using are some titanium dioxide and then 2 micas from Mica Mama, and they are golden shimmer and brushed copper. So I just need to make the body of the soap that's going to surround our embed, and I'm just going to do a fairly simple in the pot swirl because I've got a lot of stuff going on elsewhere. Now I need to lay a layer down first of all to support my embed because I don't want it at the bottom of the mould. So I've just literally taken about 1/3 of my batter and I've split it into 3 amounts and I've divided out my colourings. For all of my colourings I tend to use them at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. I'll then weigh out my fragrance oil for each bit of batter. And then I'm going to bring each batter to probably about a medium trace. You want to have a decent sort of thickness to these because if you pour a very light trace, you're likely to just get the colours blending together. So when I've got all 3 of them mixed up nicely and at a trace I'm happy with, I'm just going to do my in the pot swirl. So I'm going to take my brown colours and tip them into the white at opposite sides of the jug. And remember, you want to make sure that those colours go all the way through that white batter. So pour from up high and down low so they drop at various depths throughout the white batter. And then just one swirl through with the spatula. Don't overmix it or otherwise you're going to have everything all blended together in your mould. Then just simply pour it into the bottom of our mould. It doesn't matter if this layer's not super straight because it's just holding the base of that embed and the whole soap surrounding the embed is going to be the same type of soap. And once that's poured in, you just need to leave it aside to set up, not fully, but as long as it's set up enough to make sure that that embed doesn't sink. So when you're happy that your base layer is set up enough, you can pop your embed in, and then we're just going to repeat the process with the remaining batter, mix up the colours again, pop in our fragrance and complete that in the pot swirl. I didn't scrape out my pots previously because I'm going to use those extra little pieces to give me some colours to do a swirl on the top. And then when that's done, I'm going to pop it in the oven as normal, so on at 170 degrees Fahrenheit or 75 degrees centigrade. As soon as the soap goes in, I turn the oven off and then leave it in there overnight. I left the soap in the mould for about 36 hours and then I unmoulded it. And here's a shot of the sides. Look at all those bees, aren't they cute? I left it in the mould probably longer than I normally would, just because I wanted to be really certain that I wasn't going to damage those sides in any way. And then moving on to the cut of the side, I'm really pleased how it's come out. I think the honey pot's standing up nice and straight. Those lines on the pot are lovely and straight. And I really like the little drip of honey coming over the top of the pot. I'm really pleased with how that's come out. I'm not going to go through and cut every single bar on camera because they'll all look fairly similar. So we'll just do a few more and then we'll finish off a little bit of embellishment on them. So I've got my cute little honey pot soaps and I want to stamp the word honey into them. So I've made a little honey stamp and I'm just going to press that into the face of the soap. I do find using a little bit of cling wrap is really helpful because then that helps that stamp release from the soap nice and cleanly. I'm going to stamp both sides of the soap just so you get the full effect no matter which side you're using. And then just as a final finishing touch, I'm going to fill the imprinted honey word out with some soap dough. So I'm just going to take some soft soap dough, Just a very small amount because I don't want to smear too much of it over the soap, and just pack it into the word honey, smooth it all down and then very gently scrape it off of the surface of the soap so you're just left with a nice black imprint. So here we are with all of the stamps filled in with the black soap dough, and I think it highlights the wording really nicely. I'm just off in the corner there, beveling the edges of the soap. I'm not going to go through that on the camera just because it's going to make this video even longer than it already is. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you liked the soap. If you do, it would be great if you left me a thumbs up. If you've got any questions or queries or comments, then please just leave them in the comments section below. I'm really good at responding to comments, so if you do have any questions, I will get back to you. If you'd like to see what I'm making next, why not subscribe to my channel? You can do that by clicking on the logo that's coming up on the screen now. And if you'd like to be notified of any future videos, then why not ring that notification bell? Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Happy soaping!